The stars looked different tonight. From the observation deck of the UES Horizon, Commander Alex Reed stood motionless, hands clasped behind his back, eyes locked on the black beyond. The view never changed, stars, planets, the far shimmer of the Kuiper Belt, but tonight there was something new. Something moving. Something big. "Sir," came a voice from behind, tight with urgency. Lieutenant Ben Morgan, his junior officer, crossed the deck with clipped strides. "You need to see this." Reed turned, noting the pale hue in the lieutenant's face even under the dim red lighting. He followed Morgan to the bridge where every console glowed with cascading data and tension thickened the air like static. Crew members were frozen at their stations, eyes fixed on the main screen dot. At first, Reed thought it was a sensor glitch. The object on display was massive, easily the size of a city, its outline sharp and unnaturally symmetrical. A colossal wedge, like a floating arrowhead etched from obsidian and silver, glided through the outer system. Its hull shimmered with faint blue energy, crisscrossed by lines of pulsating light that suggested intelligence. Purpose. "Is it one of ours?" Reed asked, already knowing the answer. "No, sir," said Communications Officer Lisa Park. "Not human. Not any registry. It's not responding to hails. We've tried every standard frequency and even emergency protocols. Nothing." Reed's stomach clenched. 20 years in the United Earth Space Force had taught him to recognize trouble before it had a name. This wasn't just trouble, it was the unknown walking straight toward Earth. "Alert Earth Command. Tell them we have an unidentified vessel inbound. Full first contact protocol." Before the words had finished leaving his mouth, the lights flickered. A hum ran through the deck, a sound Reed felt more than heard. The main screen went black. "Did we lose visuals?" Morgan asked, voice rising. "No," Park murmured, staring in disbelief. "Something's overriding." The screen burst to life, but the vessel was gone. In its place was a face. At least, Reed assumed it was a face. 4 eyes, cold, calculating, arranged in a diamond across smooth skin the color of burnished steel. No mouth, no movement, and yet a voice echoed in Reed's mind, not through the ears, through thought itself. "Humans of Earth, we are the Vaughn. We have watched your species across many cycles." Reed stepped forward instinctively, his training kicking in. "This is Commander Alex Reed of the United Earth Space Force. We welcome peaceful contact. We hope for mutual understanding." The Vaughn's upper eyes narrowed slightly, a gesture that somehow managed to drip with disdain. "Peace. You speak of peace while your history drowns in war. We have studied your conflicts. Primitive, undisciplined. Your combat is chaos, unworthy. Inefficient." The words hit harder than missiles. Reed kept his face still. His jaw tightened. "Our past doesn't define our future," he said evenly. "We've united. We've moved beyond our mistakes." "Have you?" the voice asked coldly. "Or have you simply run out of enemies worth fighting?" Silence stretched across the bridge. No one moved. No one breathed. "We do not seek hostility," Reed said, "but we will defend ourselves." The Vaughn creature blinked its 4 eyes in perfect unison. "You misunderstand. We do not threaten. We evaluate. Prepare to be tested." The screen went dark. The bridge of the horizon remained silent long after the screen went dark. No one spoke. The hum of consoles, the faint beeping of systems realigning mundane sounds that usually filled the space, now seemed distant, irrelevant. Commander Alex Reed felt the weight of what had just occurred settle on his chest like a lead plate. Humanity had not just made contact with alien life. They had been judged by it. The Vaughn weren't here to talk. They weren't explorers or diplomats. They were executioners cloaked in superiority. And they had already passed sentence. "Commander, Lieutenant Morgan finally said, voice still edged with shock. What do we do? Reed turned slowly. We get ready. Within the hour, Horizon's comms were ablaze. Earth Command had confirmed receipt of the encounter log, and President Kate Wilson herself had requested a secure transmission. Reed stood alone in the command chamber as her face flickered to life on the wall-sized holoscreen, tension etched into every line around her eyes. We've seen the footage, she said, skipping pleasantries. We've sent word to all UEG defense posts. I need your honest assessment, Commander. Are they preparing to attack? They don't need to, Reed replied. They're giving us a test. And if we fail it, there won't be an invasion. There'll just be erasure. Wilson exhaled sharply, then turned her gaze aside, speaking off-screen. Get Admiral Turner. Convene the Emergency Defense Council. She looked back at Reed. We'll need you planetside. Immediate recall. As Horizon adjusted course back toward Earth, Reed reviewed the Vaughn transmission repeatedly. Every movement of the creature's four eyes, every subtle shift in tone and phrasing, every word that bypassed human ears and drilled directly into thought. The message wasn't a threat. It was a prelude. The cold efficiency of it haunted him. 20-4. Hours later, Reed touched down in Geneva. The city was on high alert, air traffic grounded, skies patrolled by drones, military vehicles lining the streets around the United Earth Government complex. Inside, the war room buzzed like a hornet's nest. Admiral James Turner met him at the elevator. They've parked a ship just outside the lunar orbit, he said without preamble. Hanging there, watching. No response to hails? Reed asked, even though he knew the answer. Nothing but silence. But they want us to know they're here. Inside the council chamber, Reed was ushered to the central table. President Wilson sat at the head, flanked by generals, scientists, strategists. A live display hovered in the center, showing the Vaughn ship immense, immaculate, like a knife blade suspended in space. This is no longer a theoretical threat, Wilson said as the meeting began. This is a confirmed interstellar species evaluating humanity based solely on our capacity for combat. We need a response plan. Reed? He stood, the weight of leadership suddenly heavier than any battlefield command he'd held in 2 decades. They won't respond to diplomacy. Not because they're hostile, but because they think it's irrelevant. They judge species based on tactical worth. The Vaughn believe war is the highest expression of civilization. General Harris scoffed. So we beat our chests like cavemen and show them we can throw spears? No, Reed said. We show them we can outthink them. Because they're not just warriors, they're ritualists. Everything we've seen suggests they operate under strict rules, rigid formations, perfect coordination. That's their strength, but it's also their weakness. Eyes narrowed around the table. You think we can outmaneuver them? Turner asked. I think we have to, Reed replied. They don't understand unpredictable warfare. They don't understand what happens when you put a human in a corner. But they will. Any volunteers? Someone muttered. Reed didn't hesitate. I'll lead the demonstration. The room fell silent again. Wilson leaned forward. You want to bait them? I want to show them combat they've never seen before. Controlled chaos. Fluid tactics. Minds that adapt mid-strike. I want to challenge the very foundation of their judgment. Wilson nodded slowly. Then you have Earth's backing. Do what you need. Make them see. The next 10 days moved with grim urgency. Reed assembled a team of elite strategists, special ops leaders, and xenoanalysts. They combed through every fragment of sensor data from the Vaughn. Dr. Anna Wilson, a civilian professor and expert on alien cognitive models, was brought in as the head analyst. She arrived with 2 rolling cases of data cores and a look of someone who hadn't slept in a week. Everything we've seen indicates the Vaughn evolved as herd predators, she explained, projecting a 3D anatomical breakdown of the Vaughn form. Their physiology promotes unity. Their 4 eyes give them perfect 360-degree visual awareness. Their neural structure suggests a partially distributed cognition model like a mental network between units. Individually, they're strong. Together, they're terrifying. But if we disrupt that unity, they fall apart, Reed finished. Exactly. On day 12, Earth received a second transmission. No warning. Just an override of every major channel. The same voice as before echoed across minds worldwide. 1 week remains. Prepare your demonstration. Victory is not survival. Victory is excellence. We await your test. The screen vanished. People in every country stood frozen, televisions flickering, broadcasts dead. And in Geneva, Commander Reed looked up at the stars through the open ceiling of the war room and whispered to himself, "Let's see what they do when the chaos fights back." The ocean roared below as wind whipped across the cliffs of the North Atlantic. High above the water, hidden inside a bunker carved deep into a granite bluff, the Earth's elite war council gathered beneath layers of steel in silence. Commander Alex Reed stood at the center of it all, the weight of the planet pressing into his shoulders, not metaphorically, but literally. They were deep underground for a reason. If this failed, there wouldn't be anything left to protect above. 3 days until the Vaughn returned. The war room was unlike any other. Dozens of screens lined the curved walls, displaying everything from deep space telemetry to troop readiness to Vaughn fleet positions. At the center, a massive holographic table flickered with a living map of the Earth, orbiting defense satellites, and the looming ghostly shadow of the Vaughn. Vessel still parked in lunar orbit, unmoving, unwavering, watching. Reed turned to the man beside him. Dr. Malik Okoro, a tactical architect who once taught war theory at Oxford, but now designed asymmetric resistance cells across unstable colonies. If we do this wrong, they'll see it as noise. They already see us as animals, Malik replied calmly. So maybe it's time we act like the most dangerous ones. General Harris paced behind them. This entire approach is madness, he growled. You're planning to show the most advanced military species in the galaxy that our greatest strength is, what, improvisation? No, Reed said, eyes fixed on the map. I'm going to show them that humans can weaponize uncertainty. They began assembling the demonstration not as a parade of firepower, but as a theatrical ambush. Reed requested, all Earth military branches send their most adaptive units, special forces, drone tacticians, guerrilla cell leaders, even a handful of AI war game strategists. He didn't want soldiers who followed orders. He wanted people who broke them and survived. They called it exercise paradox. The first test site was chosen, Iceland's old geothermal caverns, long since converted into subterranean training arenas. Reed and Malik configured the battlefield to mimic nothing. No predictable cover, no symmetrical layouts, no pre-programmed paths, just chaos. Twisting walls, shifting rooms, false signals, echo chambers, heat flares, invisible drones. A living nightmare for any force that relied on coordination. But that wasn't the most daring part. Reed requested permission to simulate the event live for the Vaughn. President Wilson approved. The Vaughn would see Earth's soldiers in real time, no editing, no narrative, just raw, undiluted chaos. And the human force? Outnumbered, underarmed, with a single mission: survive and disrupt. They called themselves Team Phantom. 20-4 hours before the demonstration, Reed gathered. Them in a sealed hangar beneath Reykjavik. 30 men and women. Some were scarred veterans. Some were hackers. One was a demolitions expert who'd never served in any military, but once took down a private satellite network using homemade hardware. You were chosen, Reed said, voice calm and firm, because the Vaughn don't believe people like you can win a war. There were no uniforms, just black armor modded to fit each fighter's unique style. No ranks, only mission groups. This wasn't about chain of command, it was about instinct. They believe warfare is sacred, Reed continued. That it should be beautiful, orderly, honorable. What you're going to do tomorrow is none of those things. He stepped closer, looking into every one of their eyes. You're going to show them what war looks like when it's made by a species that evolved by tearing itself apart. Tension hung in the air like smoke. Then Mrek stepped forward, activating a small device. A pulsing red light lit up on the wall. Where live, he said. They're watching. Reed nodded. The Vaughn had tuned in early. The simulation began. Instantly, the arena plunged into darkness. Vaughn observational drones granted limited access for demonstration drifted through the corridors, capturing thermal, motion, and audio data. Team Phantom did not engage directly. They scattered, vanished. The first wave of robotic attackers designed to mimic Vaughn tactics entered the field with precision, advancing in perfect V formations. The drones watched silently. And then everything broke. Explosions, screams, light flares that blinded sensors, sound pulses that disoriented formations. Drones hacked mid-flight, turned against their own. One robot walked straight off a ledge, sensors tricked by echo loops. Attackers began shooting at shadows. The Vaughn drones witnessed coordinated confusion, tactics that had no origin. Fighters who didn't retreat when surrounded, they split up, disappeared, reappeared behind. Every time the enemy adapted, the humans did something unexpected. One Vaughn drone caught the moment a soldier hurled himself into a collapsing corridor, detonated a charge, and buried 4 attackers under rubble. The drone recorded his face just before the blast. He was laughing. Mrek, monitoring the Vaughn telemetry, turned to Reed. They're confused. Their drone logs are dissenting. They can't track our patterns. Their systems are reporting logic violations. They're trying to apply a rulebook, Reed muttered, to a fire. The demonstration ended after 4 hours. Only 6 of Team Phantom remained standing, but they had destroyed or disabled every opposing force. Without matching them in numbers, without symmetry. Without mercy, Reed stood before the Vaughn transmission terminal. He didn't wait for them to speak first. You wanted to understand human combat, he said. Face like stone. That was just a simulation. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. We're even more dangerous when we're afraid. No response came. Just silence. For the first time, the Vaughn weren't talking. 3 hours later, the Vaughn fleet transmitted a single message. No video, no voice, just one sentence. Proceed with final demonstration. Direct conditions. 1 week. Mars. Reed stared at the words. Mars wasn't ready, but he was. The red sands of Mars hadn't seen blood in centuries, not since the early colonization riots, long before the domes, the terraforming, the unity. But now, beneath its frozen sky, the ghost of war stirred once more. Commander Alex Reed stood in the orbital command deck of the UES Defender, staring down at the Martian surface through reinforced glass. Below, the Mars colony shimmered inside its protective dome, home to nearly 5,000 civilians, scientists, and engineers. Peaceful. Fragile. It wouldn't stay that way. They chose Mars for a reason, said Dr. Anna Wilson, stepping beside him. Her tone was sharper now, less academic, more urgent. It's remote, underdefended, and symbolically important. First permanent colony. If they break us here... Reed didn't respond immediately. His eyes were locked on the holodisplay. New transmission from the Vaughn, still repeating on a loop. Final demonstration. Direct conditions. Mars, 1 week. No limitations. Prove your survival through war. No limitations. No rules. It's a trap, said Admiral Turner over the secure channel from Geneva. They want to provoke us into overextending. Mars is too far, too exposed. And if we refuse? Reed asked quietly. Turner's silence was answer enough. It would mean judgment. And judgment from the Vaughn meant erasure. We fight, Reed said. But with what? President Wilson's voice entered the call. Even if we reroute our nearest fleet, it'll take days to get there. Reed's jaw tightened. Then we don't fight the way they expect. 6 hours later, Reed landed at the Mars colony. He was greeted by Director Tom Miller, more bureaucrat than soldier, and his chief of security, James Rivera, a retired special ops veteran with cold eyes and a pragmatic grip on reality. This place was built for storms and power outages, Miller said, walking Reed through the command center. We've got drills, we've got repair bots, but defense? We've got 100 rifles and half-trained guards. Good, Reed replied. Miller blinked. I'm sorry, what? We don't want a military garrison. The Vaughn know how to fight armies. What they don't understand is a cornered species that knows its own terrain. Rivera's brow lifted slightly. You want to fight them here? With civilians? I want to trap them here, Reed corrected. In the tunnels. In the dust. Storms. In places their perfect formations can't follow. We're not defending Mars, we're bleeding them, he turned to Rivera. We need explosives. Environmental hazards. Randomized attack points. You know this colony inside and out? Better than my own name. Then we're going to turn it into hell. Preparation began immediately. Civilians were evacuated into the deep mining tunnels originally. Used for resource extraction, now repurposed as the battlefield's veins. Engineers rewired power systems to create magnetic interference zones. Miners turned their heavy drilling equipment into traps. Botanists armed themselves with fertilizer bombs. Children were taught to recognize Vaughn formations and report movement. Every soul played a part, but Reed wasn't done. We're going to break their network, he told Wilson, watching the sky. They coordinate through a hybrid communication system, telepathic and electronic. If we jam it again, like we did during the asteroid belt ambush, we might shatter their command structure. Anna Park, a brilliant young engineer, had a plan. Rewire the colony's central communication array into a high-intensity, randomized encryption emitter. If it works, she said, their entire battlefield cohesion could collapse. If it works? Reed asked. Park smiled thinly. Well, I've never tried to short-circuit an alien hive mind before. The next day, the Vaughn came. 5 warships descended from orbit in perfect triangular formation. Reed watched from the tunnels as the first waves touched down. Their movements were flawless, synchronized like clockwork. Columns of stone skinned. Warriors advanced through the main dome. When they found it abandoned, they spread out with surgical precision. They're scanning the colony, Rivera whispered. Trying to find the resistance, Reed nodded. Let's give them something to find. The first trap was triggered near Hydroponic Station Alpha. An entire floor collapsed beneath a squad of Vaughn, dropping them into a pit lined with plasma cutters. Seconds later, the ceiling imploded, sealing them in. A mile away, another squad advanced through Maintenance Corridor 7. They were ambushed from both sides by a team of engineers using repurposed mining lasers. The Vaughn returned fire, but the humans were already gone. vanished into emergency shafts that didn't exist on the scans. The Vaughn formations began to falter. Their perfect lines broke. Their coordination twisted. They regrouped slowly, cautiously. Reed waited until they were fully embedded in the tunnels before ordering the communication array to be activated. Across the colony, Vaughn's soldiers staggered. Some fell to their knees, clutching their heads. Others turned and fired at nothing, their synchronization shattered by the interference. Their communication severed. Each squad fought as isolated units, no longer part of a perfect war machine in orbit. General Dorn watched from his command ship. His upper eyes blinked rapidly, disturbed. The hive mind pulse that connected him to his soldiers flickered like a failing light. "Unacceptable," he said. "Restore link." "We are attempting, General," his aide replied. "The signal source, it is coming from within their colony." Dorn stared at the red planet. "They have evolved chaos into strategy." On the surface, Reed led a small team deeper into the tunnels. They moved fast, striking isolated Vaughn patrols, dragging them into blind corners, cutting through them with overwhelming aggression. It wasn't just fighting, it was surgical unpredictability. Every move they made contradicted Vaughn logic. Reed's team lured a final squad into a geothermal vent chamber. When the Vaughn formed a defense circle, Reed triggered the chamber's emergency vent purge, releasing superheated steam from beneath the Martian crust. The Vaughn's armor cracked. Their formation failed as the last soldier fell. Reed lowered his rifle. The red lights of the colony glowed dimly through the mist. He keyed his communicator. "Command, the dome is ours." On the command ship, General Dorn stared in stunned silence. His warriors, his elite, defeated not by superior firepower, but by unpredictability. By humans who refused to fight like soldiers and instead fought like survival was its own art form. "We underestimated them," he whispered. Reed, watching the battlefield from the wreckage of an airlock, felt the weight in his chest change, not lift, but shift. This wasn't the end. This was only proof. Proof that the Vaughn didn't understand combat, not really. And now they were starting to realize it. The black void beyond Neptune pulsed with unnatural light. From the edge of the solar system, where no human ship had ever lingered for long, the Vaughn fleet sat like a patient knife-sleek geometric behemoths arranged in flawless symmetry. Each vessel a blade, each formation a sentence. For them, war was not an art or necessity, it was a language. And now, humanity had answered in a dialect they could not comprehend. Inside the U's Paragon, Earth's most advanced stealth vessel, Commander Alex Reed stood motionless as the data streamed across the command table. Mars had held. Barely. The Vaughn had withdrawn their ground forces without warning, leaving only a single message: "You may delay judgment, but it must still come. Prepare." Reed stared at those words in silence. It wasn't surrender. It was interest. The Vaughn hadn't retreated out of defeat. They pulled back because they were confused. Their assumptions about humanity were beginning to crack, and he knew what came next. The real test. And it would happen here beyond the edge of Earth's defenses. On Vaughn terms, he turned to his second-in-command, Captain Maya Singh, a tactician. Forged in the orbital wars of the lunar belt. Status on the cloak? Running clean? "No trace," she said, scanning the telemetry. "We're threading through their blind arc. If their patterns stay consistent, we're ghosts. They won't change," Reed replied. "They don't know how." The Paragon crept toward the Vaughn fleet like a shadow-hunting light. Its hull, layered in adaptive plating and sensor-dampening fields, absorbed every particle of radiation and energy that might betray its presence. They were drifting just meters beneath Vaughn patrol lanes, lines of predictable symmetry that left massive blind spots between them. "Approaching the command ship," Singh said. confirming signal from their central AI nexus. General Dorn is on board. Reed's hand tightened into a fist. He hadn't seen Dorn since that first contact transmission, when the Vaughn general had stared down at Earth and declared them a species unworthy of survival. Now, Reed intended to knock on his door. The mission was madness. A direct infiltration of the Vaughn flagship. Not to destroy it, but to understand it. To get inside the mind of the enemy, and finally expose the flaw in their perfection. Professor Anna Wilson, now Reed's xenostrategic advisor, sat at the rear console, her eyes dancing over alien schematics decoded from Mars. Their neural relays form a network decision matrix, she whispered. If we jam the core nodes, we can disorient them. Not disable, but destabilize. How long will we have? Maybe 20 minutes. Before they start re-establishing local control. Reed turned back toward the boarding team 12 of the most unpredictable, unconventional human operators Earth could produce. Ex-cyber insurgents, former Black Ops saboteurs, zero-G ambush specialists. Not a single one of them had ever passed a standard field psychological evaluation. That was exactly why they were here. We goin' fast. Hit hard. Don't engage unless forced. Dorn is the objective. Data is the bonus. As the Paragon magnetically docked to the outer hull of the Vaughn command ship, silence fell across the cabin. Not fear. Not nerves. Silence born from the understanding that they were the first humans to breach the inner sanctum of an alien. War Empire. The airlock opened. The Vaughn vessel was immaculate, its hulls angular and cold, pulsing with dim blue light. No markings, no human concept of direction. Just geometry and purpose. The jamming nodes were deployed immediately. Tiny orbs that emitted high-frequency distortion fields began to flicker across the alien ship's neural grid. Lights dimmed. Hum patterns shifted. Somewhere inside, the ship felt them. Keep moving, Singh ordered. Don't engage. They slid past sentry patrols that walked in perfect formation, unblinking. The jammers worked. Confusion rippled through the Vaughn ranks like static through a neural net. Some soldiers froze, others turned in the wrong direction. Their minds, once synchronized through a shared field of thought, now stumbled in mental fog. Reed led the charge toward the central core, a vast command chamber suspended in a gravity-free sphere of reflective glass and pulsing crystal. At its center stood General Dorn. He turned as the humans breached the chamber, four eyes blinking in eerie unison. "You invade sacred ground," he said, voice echoing without sound, "as always." Inside their minds, "We're not here to fight," Reed replied. "We're here to show you something." Dorn's upper eyes narrowed. "Your chaos has disrupted battle. But confusion is not strength. It is error." "No," Reed said. "It's freedom." He stepped closer, lowering his weapon. "You think our combat is unpredictable because it's flawed. It's not. It's evolved." "We have evolved past unpredictability," Dorn answered. "No," Reed said. "You've evolved into predictability so perfect, it's become weakness. Your ships, your soldiers, your minds, they're only powerful when everything follows the rules. But war doesn't follow rules. We don't follow rules, and that scares you." The chamber shuddered. Security systems blinked into life. But Dorn raised a hand holding them off. "You confuse chaos with strength." Reed shook his head. "No, you confuse order with truth." Silence fell. Then Dorn stepped down from the platform and stood directly before him. "What do you propose?" "Human, let us in," Reed said. "Show us the heart of your network. Let us see what you're so afraid of. If you're right, you win. If we're right, maybe you'll finally understand why your kind keeps losing to the unpredictable." Dorn stared, and for the first time he did not speak. Instead, He turned and opened the core door. Professor Wilson whispered, stunned, "He's letting us see it." Inside, the Vaughn command intelligence lay bare. Pulsing nodes. Relays. Of decision. Command logic arranged like crystalline language. It was beautiful. And perfectly vulnerable. Wilson plugged in a tether dot as data flooded her screen. Her face paled. "Oh my God," she muttered. "They're not just evaluating us. They're cataloging species across the galaxy. Erasing those who fail there. Tests. This has happened before. Hundreds of times." Reed stepped forward. "Why?" Dorn finally spoke again, but softer. "Not in thought, but aloud, because the first time we didn't. We lost." "To who?" Reed demanded. Dorn looked up. "The Mrek." Wilson's eyes widened. "They beat you?" "No," Dorn said. "They broke us. They showed us that even perfection has limits. We swore it would never happen again." "And now it is," Reed said quietly. Dorn stared into him. "Yes." Outside the ship, the Vaughn fleet began to shift. Patterns trembled. Movements desynchronized. The network had been touched. The illusion of invincibility cracked. Reed keyed his comm. "Upload all data to Earth Command. Prepare for emergency. Evac. What do we call this?" Singh asked, watching the alien general with new caution. Reed looked at Dorn. This perfect product of a perfect system standing still as the walls trembled. A beginning. The storm on Earth was political. 3 hours after Commander Alex Reed transmitted the Vaughn Central Network data to Earth Command, the United Earth Government's chambers in Geneva descended into organized chaos. Every intelligence officer, military strategist, and planetary leader had seen the same thing. The Vaughn hadn't come for diplomacy. They had come for elimination by classification. "This isn't war," President Kate Wilson said, pacing the Situation Room. "It's extermination disguised as evaluation. They've done it before. Dozens of times. Hundreds of civilizations. Judged. Deleted. And now they've paused," Admiral Turner said, eyes narrowed. "For us." "Not paused," Reed corrected, his voice echoing from the holoscreen beside them. He was still on board the Paragon. "En route back to Earth. They've hesitated. Because we didn't fit." Dr. Anna Wilson stood beside the president, her voice subdued. "They categorize species by their capacity for refined, collective warfare. If you pass their test, they allow diplomatic assimilation. If you fail, you're considered an existential waste of resources. Humanity's chaos, our fragmentation, has put us outside their model." Turner leaned forward. "And what does that mean?" Reed didn't blink. "It means we scared them." The room fell into a heavy silence until General Harris, sitting stiff in his uniform, broke it with a grim nod. "Then we have to press that advantage. Strike first. Hit hard. While they're still unsure." "We don't have the numbers," Turner countered, "or the ships. Our fleet is a fraction of their strength." "But we have the one thing they've never faced," Reed said. "Unpredictability." The room's tension deepened. President Wilson turned to Reed's projection. "You said there was something else in the data, something about the Mrek?" "Yes," Reed replied. "The only species to ever defeat the Vaughn, 300 years ago. After they failed to adapt to Mrek combat, the Vaughn withdrew from an entire star sector and haven't returned since. And now," Dr. Wilson added, "that region is flaring with activity. The Mrek are moving again." President Wilson's lips tightened. "Do you think they're coming for the Vaughn?" "No," Reed said. "I think they're coming for us next." Back on board the Paragon, the mood had shifted. The return trip to Earth was silent and slow. General Dorn had been placed in a sealed chamber, not out of mistrust, though that lingered, but because even he didn't seem to understand what he was feeling. He'd remained mostly quiet since opening the Vaughn neural core to Reed and Wilson. Reed visited him twice. Each time, Dorn said less but felt more. It was clear that the core breach hadn't just exposed Vaughn data. It had exposed doubt. On the third visit, Reed entered alone. "You let us in," he said. "That wasn't sanctioned." "No," Dorn agreed. "But it was necessary." Reed sat across from him. "Why?" Dorn tilted his head. "Because the last time we faced a species like you, we didn't understand why we lost. Now I begin to understand." He looked Reed dead in the eye with all four of his own. "You fight as if you are not bound to existence. No honor, no cohesion. Only the mission, only the moment." Reed leaned forward. "It's called desperation. You've never needed it. We were born in it." There was a pause. Dorn's voice softened. "Then teach me." Reed blinked. "What?" "Your chaos," Dorn said. "Your art of survival, your broken logic. The collective will not change until it is forced. I have seen enough to know ... That change must begin." Reed studied him carefully, and for the first time he believed it. 3 days later, the Paragon landed in Geneva. The world watched as General Dorn stepped off the ramp, unshackled, unarmed, but surrounded by the full force of Earth's elite guards. Cameras captured it live. Commentators didn't even know what to call it. A surrender? A diplomatic gesture? A warning? Inside the Earth Security Council chamber, Dorn stood beneath the united flag of the UEG and stared up at the highest officials of humanity. "I am not here as a conqueror," he said, speaking aloud now without the Vaughn telepathic network. "I am here as a failed algorithm." He paused. "I believe the Vaughn had mastered war. But you showed me war is not a pattern. It is a reaction. It bends. It breaks. It lies. It changes." He turned to President Wilson. "The collective will not understand this. Not until they feel it." Wilson asked the only question that mattered. "So what do we do?" Reed stepped forward. "We strike again. Not with force, but with failure. We show the Vaughn their entire philosophy is flawed." "How?" asked Harris. "We leak the data," Reed said. "Everything the Vaughn have kept hidden, the records of their defeats, their failures, the Mrek, the Mars siege. We broadcast the cracks." General Dorn spoke up. "To fracture our hierarchy is to sever our mind. Your information could dismantle our fleet coordination, collapse morale, disrupt everything." President Wilson turned slowly to Reed. "Are you suggesting mimetic warfare?" "I'm suggesting we make their own perfection turn on them," Reed answered. "We beat them from the inside." Wilson nodded once. "Then make it happen." That night, Earth launched Operation Glass Echo, a covert digital strike designed not to destroy, but to confuse. All over the Vaughn outer systems, pirate signals began infiltrating their data hubs. Artificial voices mimicked Vaughn command. Tones transmitting false orders, recursive loops, and contradictory mission data. At the same time, secret human vessels equipped with Vaughn tech stolen from the Mars and Neptune campaigns drifted into Vaughn space, using Vaughn signatures, and began projecting human battle simulations. Small, outnumbered forces using chaos to defeat the impossible. Within 48 hours, Vaughn system logic began to fracture. Entire scout ships returned to base without explanation. Coordinated patrols separated and failed to realign. One outer rim installation detonated its own failsafe due to conflicting command inputs. In their attempt to emulate order, the Vaughn had created a system too fragile to withstand contradiction. And humanity had just introduced the virus of doubt. Back in Geneva, Reed stood before the council again. "We've shown them how to break their code," he said. "Now we give them a choice. Which is? President Wilson asked. Adapt or be left behind. A long silence followed, until Dorn, standing beside him now, offered a single phrase. The collective will listen, but only if we strike again. Reed nodded. Then we go to their core worlds. You're talking about suicide, Turner warned. No, Reed said. I'm talking about teaching. The only language they understand is war, so we show them a new kind. Turner shook his head. And if the Mrek arrive first? Reed's expression didn't change. Then we prove to both of them that humans aren't here to join the galaxy's order. He turned away. We're here to rewrite it. The Vaughn home system had no name, not one that could be spoken in any human language at least. It was a place encoded in mathematical ratios and harmonic frequencies, a star mapped by culture, not by cartography. But it existed deep beyond. The Veil Nebula, hidden in a dense cluster of radiation storms and gravitational anomalies. No probe had ever returned. No explorer had made it that far until now. The U's aegis sliced through the black, cloaked in technology reverse-engineered from the Vaughn's own systems. It was humanity's first interstellar penetration mission, part scout ship, part Trojan horse. At its helm, Commander Alex Reed sat in silence, surrounded by a crew that knew the odds and boarded anyway. Outside the viewport, the sky shimmered with violet static. The gravity tides warped reality. The ship groaned as it passed through. The boundary zone, what Professor Anna Wilson had dubbed the curtain. Beyond it lay something that had only ever been rumored the Vaughn core worlds. Behind them, the data virus had already begun its slow burn. Earth's mimetic infiltration campaign, Operation Glass Echo, was unraveling the Vaughn fleet cohesion. System by system. Signals now leaked from every known Vaughn relay. Recordings of humans winning battles, simulations of unpredictable outcomes, and most dangerously, their own censored history. Within 2 weeks, 2 Vaughn colonies had declared independence from the collective's command AI, seeking new direction. One destroyed itself in confusion. The others simply stopped responding. They're fragmenting. Anna Wilson said quietly from her console, eyes flickering across the alien code. Not quickly, but undeniably. Which is why we're here, Reed replied. Before they harden again. Before the Mrek arrive, she added. That name hadn't left Reed's mind. From the moment Dorn had spoken it, the Mrek. A shadow had settled over everything. The only species to defeat the Vaughn. The only ones to survive their judgment. A myth made real. And they were moving again. It wasn't just a ticking clock anymore. It was a race. As the Aegis slipped past a fractured orbital station abandoned. Its lights flickering erratically, Reed felt the weight of something monumental. The Vaughn Empire was decaying from within. The virus of chaos of humanity was spreading. But what would rise from the collapse? They reached orbit over the Vaughn homeworld, a planet unlike anything seen in human history. Its surface was perfectly divided hexagonal city sections stretching across continents like a hive-scale to planetary size. Everything symmetrical. Everything calculated. Even the oceans flowed through guided channels, redirected by gravity constructs into optimal currents. But the perfection was breaking. Below, one of the great hex cities flickered. Explosions rippled across its edges, tiny fractures, but visible. From orbit, civil unrest, Anna whispered, or internal revolt, Singh added, scanning telemetry. Their hierarchy is cracking, Reed stood. Let's crack it further. The Aegis descended cloaked, threading through automated defenses too confused by conflicting Vaughn command signals to respond. They landed outside of primary control. Spire and AI governance pillar known as the Axis. Inside, it was silent. No guards, no resistance. Just the hum of ancient machines and an intelligence stretched too thin across too many fractures. Uploading the final package, Anna said, inserting a cipher core into the Axis console. This one's different, a data mirror. It will reflect every command the AI sends back onto itself, a recursive loop. The machine won't know what's real. Won't it adapt? Singh asked. No, Anna said softly, because it doesn't know how. We're not beating it with strength. We're feeding it its own perfection until it chokes. Suddenly, lights dimmed. The room pulsed. Reed raised his weapon. Talk to me. Anna stared at the screen. It's talking back. The AI didn't speak in words. It projected images, memories, visual fragments of past Vaughn wars, worlds conquered, enemies classified and erased. Then human battles, Mars, the asteroid belt, the ambushes, the unpredictability. Then a new image. The Mrek. They looked like chaos incarnate bladed exoskeletons that shifted shape as they moved, bodies that bent logic, signals that fluctuated faster than any known processing speed. The Vaughn had fought them with full force and lost badly. What the hell? Singh breathed, but the images weren't over. Now the AI showed Earth, the Aegis, this very room. But behind them, Reed spun. A figure stood in the doorway. It wasn't Vaughn. It wasn't human. The figure was tall, armored in black organic plating that shimmered with impossible colors. No face, no eyes, but it radiated presence, pure, unfiltered. Well, Anna gasped. How did it get here? Reed didn't move. It didn't follow us. It was already here, Anna realized. It's watching the Vaughn crumble, waiting. The figure stepped closer. Identify, Reed said, his voice calm, his hand hovering over his weapon. The figure didn't respond in sound. It responded in pressure. Thoughts, not like the Vaughn's cold, mathematical speech, but wild, layered, like a storm of instinct and understanding crashing through the mind. You fractured them. The message rang like thunder. Now you must choose. What rises? What are you? Reed asked, barely keeping his voice steady. We are what comes after patterns break. What remains when perfection fails. We are the memory of defeat and the shape of what learns. The Mrek, Anna whispered. Reed stepped forward. What do you want? To see if you're like them. Or worse. The figure turned to the console. Watch the data loop destroy the Vaughn. Axis from within. You shattered the Vaughn with your chaos. But your kind walks the edge of entropy. Reed's jaw clenched. You came to judge us. No, that's their mistake. We came to understand you. If we can single quotes the thought didn't finish. It didn't need to. The figure stepped back into the shadows of the Axis chamber and vanished. Reed exhaled only when the light stabilized. Status, he said. Anna's voice shook. The Axis is offline. The Vaughn system is blind. For the first time in history. Singh looked at him. And the Mrek? Reed didn't answer for a moment. Then, they're not here to fight. Not yet, but we just became their focus. The team returned to the Aegis in silence. As the ship lifted off from the crumbling Vaughn world. Reed looked out over the planet that had once commanded galactic fear, now flickering with the fires of revolution and data collapse. The Vaughn were no longer the enemy. They were just the first domino. And the next had already begun to tip. ChatGPT said, the journey back from the Vaughn core was not a victory lap. It was a race against dread. The U's Aegis glided through deep space under full stealth, its hull humming with the tension of history. Behind them, the Vaughn system buckled its networks shattered by recursive logic loops, its fleets crumbling into leaderless confusion, and its people, once united under a singular command architecture, splintered into independent chaos. But none of that comforted Commander Alex Reed, because something worse had awakened. The Mrek had returned. And they hadn't come to conquer. Not yet. Not openly. They were watching. Testing. Reed stood alone in the Aegis's forward observation bay, eyes locked on the infinite black ahead. The stars felt different now, like the map had changed beneath his feet. They had gone into the lion's den to fight the Vaughn, and instead found the silent gaze of the wolf that had already been there. He turned as Professor Anna Wilson entered, her face pale from sleepless hours of decoding the Mrek's residual psychic imprint. They left traces in the Axis network, she said. Back doors. Buried deep. I think the Vaughn never really purged them after their defeat. They adapted around the trauma, like scar tissue. Reed frowned. So the Mrek never left? Or never had to, Anna said. They don't fight wars like us. They embed themselves in systems, in thoughts. They're mimetic predators. She nodded slowly. They don't just break societies. They overwrite them. Reed felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. And now they're studying us. Anna handed him a tablet. We've cataloged everything the Vaughn collected about them. And I think, Commander, I think they judged the Vaughn unworthy not because they were weak, but because they were too rigid, too known. Reed studied the Mrek imagery fluid forms, chaotic movement, strategies that rewrote themselves mid-conflict. So what do they do with species that are too unpredictable? That's what worries me, Anna whispered. I don't think the Mrek fear chaos. I think they consume it. By the time the Aegis reached Earth orbit, the solar system was no longer the place Reed had left. Operation Glass Echo had triggered a cascade effect. Vaughn fleets in the Vaughn fleets in the phone Tom Hounjoins. Outer colonies had collapsed without central coordination. Some splintered into warlords. Others attempted surrender to Earth vessels. One fleet, rather than adapt to disorder, self-immolated in a display of what Reed could only interpret as programmed honor suicide. But worse than any of that were the transmissions. Messages from unmapped systems. Fragments of code. Shifting. Radio signals that didn't follow any known linguistic pattern. Some broadcasts made ships crash. Others triggered hallucinations in receivers, and one played only static until it whispered the names of Earth's leaders. Reed stormed into the Geneva War Room the moment he landed. President Wilson was already mid-briefing. Holograms filled the chamber maps of the solar system, charts of mass psychological disturbances, videos of Vaughn soldiers laying down their weapons and sobbing in confused surrender. Turner saw Reed first. Commander, you brought us a ghost. Reed didn't waste time. The Mrek are already here. Physically? Wilson asked, dread in her voice. No, but it's worse than that. They've left traces, psychic footprints, weaponized thought forms. The Vaughn called them demons of reason. Now I understand why. Anna stepped in beside him, projecting the image of the Axis data leak. This isn't just war, Madame President. This is invasion by cognition. The Mrek rewrite civilizations from within. They don't fight bodies. They fight systems of understanding. Turner slammed his fist on the table. What does that even mean? It means they're testing how much contradiction a species can handle before its structure collapses, Anna said. Wilson folded her arms. So how do we fight them? You don't, Reed answered. Not directly. The room froze. You teach them. You flood them with unpredictability, with contradictions, with so much self-awareness, so much conflict, that they can't find a pattern to exploit. You want us to turn humanity into a chaos field, Turner said. Yes, Anna replied, because if we become too ordered, too comprehensible, we become edible. The UEG launched Operation Mirror Storm within hours. Reed coordinated the rollout personally. Across Earth, every cultural, military, and cognitive institution was instructed to amplify divergence. No central broadcast could repeat the same news twice. Military simulations were randomized mid-execution. Social platforms were flooded with self-conflicting narratives: true, false, contradictory, absurd. AI moderation systems were taken offline and replaced with controlled entropy logic. Even schools began teaching paradox as part of basic logic. Curriculum. The Mrek didn't just need to be defied. They needed to be overfed. Think of them like predators who hunt by recognizing intention. Anna told Earth's combined military council. We give them too many intentions from too many vectors at once. They lose the ability to lock on. Turner narrowed his eyes. And what happens if this turns on us? Reed replied, then we prove we're stronger than our own madness. 2 days later, the first Mrek vessel appeared. It didn't arrive by normal means. It simply was. One moment the sky above the lunar defense ring was clear. The next, a structure the size of Everest hovered silently, cloaked in shadow and refraction. Every Earth system that attempted to scan it returned a different result. To some, it was a perfect sphere. To others, a twisting fractal. To a few, it looked like something from their own dreams. No weapons, no signals, just observation. Reed stood on the deck of the Aegis, now stationed in low lunar orbit, watching. As the Mrek vessel pulsed with colorless light. Any response to contact? He asked the communications officer. Sir, we're not even sure where to send the message. They know we see them, Anna said quietly. That's the message. Reed tapped the glass. Then let's send one back. He initiated a full broadcast, not of words but of chaos. Hundreds of live video feeds. Urban protests. Military drills, children's laughter. Simulations of every war humanity had ever fought. Contradictory data files. Competing philosophies. A portrait of Earth as it truly was. A storm that had survived itself. The Mrek vessel pulsed once, then twice, then vanished. No weapons fired. No ships followed. But the message, Reed realized, had been received, and maybe, just maybe, understood. He turned to Anna. What now? She didn't smile. We wait. If they return, it won't be to observe. Reed nodded. Then we don't unify. He looked out at the stars, thousands of possibilities in every light. We diverge, and we survive by never becoming one thing. And somewhere in the deep between galaxies, a new storm turned its gaze toward Earth. The stars above Earth no longer shimmered with wonder. They pulsed with intent. Within a week of the Mrek vessel's silent appearance and disappearance, the atmosphere on Earth had shifted from celebration to tension so taut it seemed to hum beneath every conversation. Something had changed, not just out there in the black, but here, in the way people moved, spoke, questioned. It was as if the collective mind of humanity had felt the cold touch of something older, deeper, and had no word. For a dot, and that terrified them. In Geneva, the United Earth government met under full lockdown. The council chamber buzzed with energy and dread. Real-time feeds from every nation lit the walls. All across Earth, strange behaviors were emerging. Citizens dreaming in unknown languages, machines executing phantom code, and a growing sense of synchronicity between unrelated events. Commander Alex Reed stood in front of the largest wall display, hands clasped behind his back as if restraining the weight of what he knew. Is this the beginning? President Kate Wilson asked, voice steady but pale with fatigue. No, Reed said. This is the test. Dr. Anna Wilson, flanking him, tapped her tablet, revealing a cascade of neurocognitive scans from across the globe. The Mrek didn't invade. They seeded. They left triggers behind in our information infrastructure, buried deep in the cognitive frameworks we exposed to them during Operation Mirrorstorm. You're saying they infected us? Admiral Turner asked sharply. No. Anna corrected. They challenged us. On cue, the lights in the chamber flickered, not from failure, but interference. Every device briefly displayed a geometric fractal, shifting, fluid, impossible to process consciously. It vanished in an instant. General Harris cursed under his breath. That's the 4th time today. They're measuring resonance, Anna said. Seeing how our society responds to inputs we don't understand. Not with violence, with interpretation. President Wilson narrowed her eyes. And, what if we interpret wrong? Reed answered before Anna could. Then they'll consider us comprehensible, predictable, edible. That word landed like a hammer in the room. So what's our next move? Turner asked. Reed turned from the display. We hit them back, not with weapons, with what they fear. And what's that? Our ability to make meaning out of madness. Operation Echelon began that night. Unlike any previous military effort in human history, it involved not armies or fleets, but creators, poets, artists, coders, philosophers, children, AI, systems programmed to hallucinate and remix, culture. Writers asked to craft parables that contradicted their own endings. Musicians instructed to compose symphonies that made sense played forward, backward, or upside down. These weren't distractions. They were weapons. Humanity began to flood its own networks with so much conceptual density, so many overlapping symbols and conflicting narratives, that the information became nonlinear. It wasn't about chaos anymore. It was about layered consciousness. You're building a cognitive labyrinth, Anna told Reed as they watched a projection of Earth's neural web folding in on itself. A mental weapon we don't even fully understand. We're not meant to, Reed said. We're meant to survive inside it. Meanwhile, the Vaughn had begun to stir. The shattered fragments of their once immaculate fleets were reforming, not into their old hierarchy, but something new. The loss of their command matrix had left a vacuum, and into that void, fragments of human philosophy had bled through. On Europa, a small band of Vaughn defectors had formed an enclave called the Broken Blade, a hybrid military communal collective, embracing human-style asymmetry. They no longer marched in lines. They moved in spirals. Their leader? Former Vaughn General Dorne. In a recorded message sent to Earth Command. Dorne stood in an Earth-style military uniform. The collective has collapsed, but the Vaughn live. We will no longer purge what we do not understand. We will now adapt. Teach us how to exist without symmetry. And we will help you face what comes. Reed watched the message and felt something he hadn't expected from a Vaughn. Pride. They're becoming something else, he said. Because of us, Anna whispered. No, Reed replied. Because of themselves. We just cracked the shell. But the Mrek weren't waiting idly. 6 days after the emergence of Operation Echelon, the first true incursion began. In a far-off system near the edge of what was once Vaughn space, a deep space relay. Went dark, then another. Then 3 in a row. Scout vessels sent to investigate returned with reports that made no logical sense. Geometry folding mid-flight, ships rearranged from the inside out, crews experiencing years of aging in minutes, or in one case, an entire ship that returned before it had left. Whatever the Mrek were doing, it wasn't war. It was redefinition. They're rewriting physics in localized fields, Anna said in a stunned whisper as the footage played in the Geneva chamber. Changing. What's possible? Can we stop them? Turner asked. Reed shook his head. We can only resist by staying unpredictable. And how do we do that? We evolve, Reed said. Not technologically, cognitively. We build a culture that cannot be summarized, a civilization that cannot be modeled. Wilson leaned forward. And how do we know if it's working? As if summoned by the question, every screen in the room went dark, then lit up again, this time showing a single image, not a threat, not a weapon. A face, or rather, the approximation of one. An abstract design, 3 eyes over a flickering void. A mouth that shifted between joy and horror in fractal stutters. A symbol, an invitation. A mirror. Anna stared at it. It's not speaking, it's asking. Turner looked ready to raise the fleet. Wilson did not. What's it asking? She said quietly. Reed stepped closer, his voice low. It's asking who we are when we stop being what we were. He turned to the room, and for the first time, there was no fear in his voice, only awe. They're not trying to destroy us. They're trying to see if we're ready to become something else. And far away, in the dark behind the stars, the Mrek waited not as conquerors, but as the next question in humanity's evolutionary test. The skies over Earth shimmered with echoes of thought. By the 10th day after the Mrek's cognitive incursion, nothing on Earth was untouched. Entire sectors of society had been restructured. Education, media, even government operations were. And no longer linear. News broadcasts didn't deliver headlines. They delivered perspectives. Classrooms taught paradox alongside mathematics. Civil engineers consulted poets before designing bridges. And yet, for all the disruption, Earth had not collapsed. It had bent. It had absorbed the chaos. Now it stood imperfect, incoherent, brilliant as something no species in known history had become. A civilization that chose contradiction. In orbit, Commander Alex Reed watched from the command deck of the UES Horizon, the same ship where it had all begun. Below, Earth no longer looked like a planet waiting to be judged. It looked like a storm that had made peace with the wind. Reed's eyes turned upward, because the final test had come. 3 Mrek vessels now floated just beyond the moon, visible to the naked eye from Earth's surface. They shimmered like mirages, refusing to be locked into geometry. One appeared as a tower made of time. Another looked like it was weeping molten stars. The third simply pulsed, like a heart with no body. They had made no threats. They had asked no questions, but they had arrived. Behind Reed, President Wilson stood at the observation glass beside General Turner and Dr. Anna Wilson. The atmosphere was cold, electric and transcendent all at once. Still no communication? The president asked. Not in any conventional sense, Anna replied. No symbols, no waves. But the thought pressure is increasing. Like they're waiting for us to respond, not to their presence, but to our own reflection. Reed nodded. They want to see what we've become. Turner crossed his arms. Then what are we waiting for? Show them. Reed didn't look back. We already have. What came next was not a battle, not a negotiation, not even an event. By human terms, it was a convergence. All over Earth, people looked up, and the Mrek looked back. Then something impossible happened. The Mrek ships began transmitting, not through signal, but impression. Every living human felt it, not as words, but as realizations, dreams they hadn't had, memories they never lived, concepts too vast for speech but sharp as instinct. It was a download of perspective. The Mrek weren't a species. They were a process, a cosmic filter. They moved across galaxies not to destroy civilizations, but to challenge them. To test if sentient species could transcend instinct and pattern. To see if a race could become self-aware enough to stop repeating itself. Not just in war or power or conquest, but in meaning. To evolve from culture into metaculture. Those who passed became different. What happened to them, no one knew. Who failed vanished. Reed stood at the center of Earth's command, feeling every part of the Mrek's message roll over him like thunder. Through glass dot, and then came the moment. The Mrek mirrored dot above every continent, across every screen, through every voice assistant and personal device humanity saw itself, projected, amplified, rewritten, from its most savage wars to its most transcendent, art.humanity. All of it. A species that had clawed out of mud, built machines to map stars, torn itself apart in hate, wept over songs it didn't understand, and now stood facing gods made of logic and shadows and said, "We are chaos. We are story. We are still writing." For one breathless instant, the Mrek ships pulsed in perfect symmetry. Then they vanished. No light. No departure flash. Just absence, like they had never been. Silence followed. Then a slow, rising tremor of disbelief. On Earth, people looked up to skies now empty and didn't know whether to cheer or cry. In Geneva, President Wilson sat down slowly in her chair, eyes locked on the ceiling as if expecting the stars themselves to whisper. "Did we win?" she asked, voice quiet. Reed answered her, but his gaze was distant. No. He turned toward the projection window where the Earth turned slowly beneath them blue. Alive, fractured, and whole all at once, we became. In the days that followed, Earth changed again, not because it had to, but because it wanted to. Vaughn, now fully splintered from their collapsed collective, sent individual envoys to Earth, no longer seeking dominance but understanding. They had felt the Mrek's pressure, but had lacked the flexibility to survive it. Now they begged to learn. And humanity, once prey, became teacher. The first interspecies academy was built not to train soldiers, but interpreters of culture. Not fighters, but philosophers of uncertainty. The new diplomatic corps weren't trained in language, they were trained in contradiction. General Dorn stood at its gate each morning, now a mentor to a dozen Vaughn offspring, each learning to laugh, fail, adapt. Children of two worlds. Anna Wilson published the Codex of Divergence, a compendium of chaos theory, art, and military thought that would become the blueprint for every allied civilization that wanted to resist Mrek incursion. And Reed? He stepped back, not in failure. In peace. He became the first human ambassador to the Broken Blade Enclave, a place where once marching Vaughn warriors now danced to asymmetrical music, practiced unscripted duels, and studied Earth's literature. Like scripture, one evening, as Reed looked out over the red sands of Europa, a Vaughn child approached him. "Are they gone forever?" The child asked, gazing toward the stars. Reed thought of the Mrek, of their ship, their pressure, their question. "No," he said. "Just watching. Will they come back?" Reed smiled softly. "They don't need to." "Why?" Reed looked up at the stars again. "Because the moment we stopped trying to be like them, the moment we embraced who we are, that was when we proved we were ready for the galaxy." The child was silent, then nodded. In the sky, the stars pulsed. Not as threats, but as potential. As possibilities. As futures waiting to be written by hands that no longer feared their own chaos.